This meeting is being recorded.
This is the Techno Buffet podcast, episode number 583, recorded Thursday, May 5th, 2022, in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
That was melancholy.
Well, just before this, I was telling you last week how I was having a hard week and it persisted into this week. I told you that right after the show, I think. But, I went and wasn't feeling 100%, so I took my temperature. It seems slightly elevated, so I decided to take a COVID test. They give them out for free now, so why not? Apparently, assuming the test is accurate, I don't have COVID, which is good. But I still feel lousy. I miss living in a world where that wasn't the first place my mind went when I felt sick, but yeah. Either way, the week has been very draining with me running around doing a lot of things that I don't want to do, that I'm not supposed to be doing, but yet somehow I am the best choice to do, which annoys me to no end. But I'm here. I'm going to perk up to the best of my ability, and I have one more day. It's Thursday night, so I have one more day, and hopefully I can rest all weekend, and I'll feel better on Monday.
Sweet.
And we'll see. Anyway. Other than that, let's see, what did I do of a productive nature in the home? I did several things related to my home of a semi-automation-y nature.
Really?
Well, I replaced the light fixtures in my kitchen. The reason I'm saying that's semi-automation-y is that the reason I replaced the lights, they were already controlled, but now they work better, because the old lights were old. But I was contemplating this because let's say that you have a smart switch of any type.
I do have a smart switch.
Well, no, this is a hypothetical.
Oh.
But you want to do color control. So you want the light to be able to change color. So all of the color changing light equipment is always built into the fixture or the bulb. So how do you control it from the switch? The only way that I can think of is the switch in reality doesn't control the load to the light. In reality, all that the switch does is send signals to the light. So you essentially wire around the switch so that the load essentially does nothing.
Didn't we discuss this?
Yeah, but I've been thinking about it more. And I've done that before, but it just seems like, and
because that's exactly what I did with all my lights. The electricity to the lights is hardwired on now.
Yeah,
and
the reason
there's just a button that controls it via wireless.
Yeah, the thing that worries me about that is, of course, when things fail, I can't turn the lights off. So I did come up with a solution here in my living room, where
You can't turn them on either. So, like, if you could, as an example, the lights from Cough,
yeah,
you can configure them so that when you lose electricity,
yep,
they either come on or off. So imagine that you lose electricity and the lights come, and then you get electricity back. Your home assistant's still booting up, or maybe it fried your home assistant, and now either you can't turn the lights off or you can't turn them on. It's true. It can
Yeah.
happen.
So, one Home Assistant in the version that was released this week. For the first time, I watched some of the live release party stream. It was like a 2-hour stream. I watched like an hour of it while I was doing something else. I don't know what they talked about for the second hour, but that's a lot of talking about a release. Anyway.
There was a lot of cool stuff in this release, I believe.
No, it was, but there was one
Especially
feature.
if you like to make scripts.
Yeah, but there was one feature
Automations.
that came up. I knew it was coming because I've been looking for it related to this problem a few weeks ago, and I found the merge notation. So the Zigbee integration, which is the ZHA one, not the... You can also have Zigbee to MQTT to do it. The built-in Zigbee integration now has the ability to set the power loss state of your devices, if they support it, in the interface. So as soon as I upgraded, I went in and set it. It was set to power on, which is the default for most devices, that if it loses power, I changed it to last state. So whatever it was, it should stay at.
Right.
Yeah. So this relates to a different problem. So you know that I mentioned to you that I spend a lot of time in a place upstate that I've done some work on the home automation side. Well, I think I was telling you about this. I think I mentioned I finally found an electrician up there that we've been calling for years to try to find one, and one had an opening. When they were upgrading the lighting there, I didn't know they were coming, so I didn't order more of them, but I happened to have 3 smart switches sitting waiting to be installed that I was waiting for an opportunity, and I thought this... Had I known they were going to be there, I would have bought more and had them do it while they were doing other things, but they installed the switches for me while they were putting in lighting. So one of the things that my family called them for up there was all of the light switches in the room were controlling outlets and lamps. So now they control ceiling lighting. But anyway, back to the problem. In the bedroom that I stayed in there, I'd put in 2 smart light bulbs. And here's the problem. Power outages happen all the time up there. Including, as you may remember, there was not a power but an internet outage that caused me to miss an episode of the show a few weeks back.
Right.
So, in addition to the home monitoring that I've built up there, I have a Home Assistant instance that I use to monitor the place when no one's there. There's somebody in the neighborhood who comes and checks on it periodically. You know, nice neighbors and such. So she would keep showing up there and find that the lights in my bedroom were on. The ones because of the power failure problem. So I've been very interested in solving that problem because it's annoying to just suddenly have lights on in a place and not notice. So now I should be able to solve that, except I got rid of all of those lights because they're now ceiling lights, but I left one little desk lamp and I have a cough bulb sitting in my suitcase waiting for the next time I go up there. So I'll be installing a cough bulb to control the one light that is not ceiling mounted. But back here in my apartment, I have this weird problem where the light switch that is wired through and occasionally seems to just reset itself and cut the load, which caused the lights in the ceiling to turn on or off, as well as the ceiling fan. So the light in this room, the power goes to a ceiling fan and it goes to 2 old hi-hats. So I wired through, and the switch in the configuration, since this is a Tesmoda switch, is set to always keep the load to high. So there's actually no way in the switch itself to turn it off. I have to go into the settings and reconfigure it, and that's fine with me. If it ever comes up as an issue, I don't want that. I don't want that accidentally exposed. But lately, it's occasionally been resetting itself. And just randomly, the lights in here will suddenly just turn off. So I've been thinking of doing something about it, which is why I've been thinking about that problem. Now I need to find another electrician. Well, it's my own fault. When I had a really good electrician, it was a different point in my life, and I've been here a long time, for the entirety of this program, in fact, and Originally, the room had no, again, same as elsewhere that I mentioned, it had a switch that controlled an outlet. And years ago, what my father did when he installed a lamp in here is he actually wired a plug cord into a ceiling fan and plugged it into the outlet, which is sort of a weird way to do it. So one of the things I wanted to do was eliminate that and actually have a ceiling box. But that meant that because of the shape of the room, I put the fan where it was when it had been mounted decades earlier by my father, and that was over to one side of the room. So I decided to get two hi-hats for the other side. The mistake I made was I should have had all the wires wired back to the switch. So the wiring goes from the light switch to the fan, and then out of the fan to the other two lights in the room. I should have wired everything back to the switch. And as I said, I regret that. So if I ever found somebody I trusted, I'd probably ask them to run the wire for me. It is not something I want to do myself. For one, I hate BX cabling. Have you ever dealt with that stuff?
Solid core?
Yeah.
No, I like it.
No, I like it. I like having it. I'm saying it's a pain in the neck to cut. I get annoyed.
Pain in the neck to cut, to run, to route, to...
Yeah.
Yeah, but once it's in, oh baby.
No, it's code here. You can't use Romex in New York City. One of those weird things. Also, apparently you can't use it in South Florida either.
Really?
Not according to the electrician who's trying to fix my parents' place down there.
Wow. Alrighty then.
Yeah, well, I'll take their word for it. I know it's definitely code here, but what do I know about electrical code in Florida? But anyway, so that's not something I want to deal with. And, to be honest, my electrical skills are somewhat limited anyway. I know how to replace a light switch, but I'm not doing anything that involves running new cable. So I'd rather get somebody who knows what they're doing. The difference between me and an electrician is that an electrician doesn't turn off the power when he's doing things. And I do.
No, I think depending on what the electrician is doing, they should still turn it.
No, I'm saying when adding a new line, they never do. None of the ones I ever see, when they're adding a new line or running an extra outlet or an extra light switch or anything like that, they never shut off the power.
Okay.
And I've been shocked too many times. Admittedly, 110 isn't horrible, but I've been shocked too many times to want to try to experience that. So, anyway, me and my electrical things aside, I essentially relit my kitchen. And then the more automation part of it was I've been essentially playing with scenes. So I had never actually done much with scenes. I'd done everything with automations. But I figured I'm doing 5 different things, and I want them to be triggered by multiple different things, so I might as well create a scene. And then the scene will be the thing that actually gets triggered by the automation, and that just saves me a little time on not having it do the same thing over and over again. So, something of a change. I've been essentially revamping a lot of things to try to break things into easier pieces to make my life easier. And I thought that was a nice sort of way to do things. Have you done much with scene planning?
I did for a minute.
Yeah.
Where I used scenes so that I could, I wanted to double tap in order to get, turn the lights to full bright. And I use scenes for that.
That seems overkill for that.
Well, yeah, but I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying, and I was doing this in a completely different context that had nothing to do with home automation, the sort of breaking things into blocks that were reusable rather than me trying to copy the same code over and over again. And you see that I'm assuming when you do programming, which is you write a function instead of putting everything in one gigantic loop if you're using it over and over again. So I decided scenes would be like that for me, which was the change that I made. Not for when I want an automation to do one thing, but when I want multiple automations to all trigger the same multiple set of parameters. So the one that I came up with is the apartment-wide lights off and apartment-wide lights on. So essentially, when I leave my apartment, I want, if there's nobody here, I want the lights to go into a, we'll just say the away configuration. So I have essentially a I'm not here scene. And that's multiple rooms. So I want, let's say, the living room to be off, the kitchen to be off, the bedroom to be off, but I have some lights that I keep on. For example, I have some ambient lighting that stays on when I'm not here. And then I have a second thing that occasionally turns on lights to make people think I'm here when I'm not around, which is a different thing. But I also have, when I wake up in the morning, what I was doing was I was running individual programs to turn on the bedroom, living room, and kitchen lights, because I, like many people, will wake up, go to the bathroom, go into the living room, pass through the kitchen, have something to eat, and walk between those three rooms. So I wanted to be able to sort of trigger my normal lighting sequence for all three of them before I left the bedroom. So that sort of thing is perfect for a scene where I want to do all sorts of different things and configure all sorts of different lights at once. And I may continue with that, just again, when I want to do all these different things at once. And again, it simplifies my automations, because I was repeating the same instructions that essentially do these 5 things that I'm based on this trigger when I want to have multiple triggers. Anyway.
Well, you know that a given automation can have multiple triggers.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is a lot of them are
together.
Yeah, I could adjust it that way and have multiple triggers. It's just that some of them are, I would never figure out what was going on in some cases. So logically, I think it's easier for me to have different automations in some of these cases. So some of my automations do have multiple triggers, but I'm saying they're completely different things happening. So the I'm going to bed, make sure all the lights in the house are off, may do the same thing as I'm leaving the house, make sure all the lights are off, but they have a bunch of different parameters. And it would be really annoying to sort of mix them together. One of them is I'm in the house, but I'm going to bed, and the other is I'm leaving the house, but again, similar result. So as I said, it's just me trying to organize things a bit. Because I've been doing all these things, it just makes it really hard for me to keep track of it and to build off of it. So breaking it into pieces works a little more logically for me. Anyway, so a few things happened. Some of these are left over from our, we'll call it the desert of episodes of recently.
Yep.
But we have some new ones as well. So Google TV apparently has put in a favorite channels feature. So this is their live tab where you can essentially create your dedicated list of things. But they're trying yeah, what they're trying to do is sort of make this a better feature. So you can now have these favorite channels, so you don't need to look through every single thing that they have. The favorites are at the top. And I find it interesting, since remember, these are channels from various streaming services, such as Pluto TV, Sling, YouTube. So it looks very good. I know at some point in my life I'm going to switch to streaming TV from my homebrew DVR, because the world will move in that direction and I'll be left behind. Although
it's moving there now.
Well,
it just sucks right now.
Yeah, I'm not ready to make that plunge. And on some things I'm forward, and on some things I'm retro. For example, remember, I buy physical media still, and for movies and such, streaming has pretty much taken over. For music, it's taken over, but I still like having physical media, even though I rip that physical media and then stream it. So I'm sure there are other things in my life where I will stay that way. I do not know if having a cable subscription will be one of them. And admittedly, I barely use my cable subscription, but the other problem is you can't get a good deal on internet unless you pay for television for some reason. Have you noticed that?
Nope.
No, the thing is, if you look at all the deals, it's only if you have like the double or the triple, like the phone, TV, and internet ends up being the same cost as just getting the internet half the time, and you get I don't know how they come up with these plans.
I don't think that's the case for me.
It has been when I've looked at Verizon, who's my current provider. It has been when I've looked at Spectrum, who handles the internet upstate. I did look at it for Comcast when that was, but as you heard from my story of my parents' place in Florida that I also take care of their internet infrastructure for, that was handled by their building, so there was no real research into the plan. But again, it definitely the case with the two providers that I dealt with the most. That for some reason the plan there's always a deal on the plan, but there's never a deal on the a la carte stuff. It always costs more money.
Well, I use AT&T.
Yeah,
And
I've heard of them.
maybe it's because it's fiber.
Well, Verizon's fiber, at least what I'm using with them. But I'm saying it just seems to, it might be that's different regions have different ways of doing this, and it might be because of different competition. But for some reason, the bundle plan always ends up, you end up paying a lot more and getting a lot less if you just buy internet. Which, anyway. So the next story on this list is one that annoys me. The Wyze room sensor launched. So I decided to rid myself of Wyze. That was one of my other projects for last week. I got rid of the majority of the Wyze cameras. I would have gotten rid of all of them. There's still 2 left that would have gone if not for the fact that Amazon had a sale on the replacement cameras I was using, and apparently a lot of people bought them, so the shipping date for the remaining 2 cameras has been pushed back to next week. And as I mentioned to you, I switched to the Eufys, which have their pros and cons. They still have the cloud component, but they also rely more on local control. But this is about the Wyze room sensor. So when I spent my extended pandemic period, the end of 2020 into 2021 in Florida, I had installed a Wyze smart thermostat there because it was the least expensive thermostat that promised remote sensors. But they never released the remote sensors. So now I've given up on Wyze for other reasons, and now they finally released the remote sensors.
Oh.
Well, technically the thermostat may be still installed, although considering that the electrician completely disconnected the entire electrical panel for the apartment, there's probably no power to it. So maybe it'll come back online one of these days. But that's a whole other... I think everybody on this podcast has heard enough tales of woe from my parents' experience in Florida. But contractors so far in South Florida have given contractors over the world a bad name, and that's really hard to do with some contractors. Anyway, so the Wyze room sensor is, again, still, if you decide to go with Wyze, the bundle package with the thermostat and the remote sensors is the least expensive way that I could find to have a thermostat that has the option of remote sensors. So there are only a few that actually offer that option, and it can be very important. So there's Honeywell, there's Ecobee, and then there's, of course, Nest. So the reason that I sort of want this is I have this problem here, and I wanted to try to do this in software with Home Assistant, but I've had a little trouble with it. I really have to have a talk with somebody who might be interested in adding a feature, because I don't want to write it. I'm not going to go learn Python right now. Where you can create a virtual thermostat in Home Assistant that controls a real thermostat but allows you to use multiple sensors.
Okay.
Why not?
I don't know. Seems reasonable.
I might be able to figure out how to do that with some things. Essentially, the biggest problem is the way that thermostats work. effectively speaking, and I'm going to just talk about the one that I have here, a thermostat is really just a switch controlled by a temperature sensor. Is that an accurate statement?
Say it again.
At least the one I have here, and again, ones with more complicated furnaces behind them may be a little more complicated. But the basic gist of how a thermostat works is it is essentially a switch that is controlled by a temperature sensor. When the temperature sensor says it's too hot, the switch is activated. When it says it's at the right temperature, the switch is turned off. The more complexity of it is you have thermostats that will essentially do more than that. They'll essentially try to cycle the power because they're trying to do various things in regards to preserving the life of the furnace, what have you. But it's at its heart, it turns it on and off when the temperature sensor is triggered to whatever it's set to. You with me so far?
Sure.
Okay. So I don't have a furnace. I have hydronic heat. So literally the wires that come out of the wall that are controlled by the thermostat are two wires. So honestly speaking, I could just go and get another ESP8266 with a connected relay that can control I think it's 24 volts is thermostat control lines. That would just essentially turn on or turn off that switch, and then write the logic into there that when the sensor was above something, and turn the switch on. Do it all in software. Instead, I installed a Z-Wave thermostat, but I should be able to get everything done because I should be able to adjust the thermostat based on a third sensor. Again, I just haven't quite figured it out with the Z-Wave part of it. So. But either way, I've digressed. I may end up having to buy a Wise room sensor if I don't replace that thermostat the next time I go and visit them. And that's for cool there, but there's a consistent fight when I visit my parents between the fact that I like it cold because I'm from New York where I'm not used to the heat when I'm visiting them because I usually come in the winter. And they're used to being in Florida because they're there. And therefore they're freezing, I'm boiling. And having a sensor seems to be a better way to do it.
Good luck.
Yep. YouTube Go is no longer deemed necessary. The app is shutting down later this year.
Oh, no.
Well, I just find this interesting because apparently all of the Go apps were designed for, reducing, data delivery, etc. And apparently what they've said is they don't need a basic version for it because things have gotten, phones and internet have gotten faster. So, but there are still third-party YouTube clients that are lightweight. So you do still have a choice.
Yeah, well, yes.
If you
Internet is continually getting better, but that doesn't mean that it's good enough for I guess it depends on where you are.
Well, I think one of the big ones would be, third world countries where pretty much people's mobile phones are their only way to connect to the internet. There's very few, full-size computers that people have access to. So there are also places where they think Facebook is the internet. But that's a whole other conversation. If you have an Amazon device, you can now view live streams from your Nest doorbell and cams, the 2021 edition.
Ooh.
But yet, if I have a Google device, I cannot view a Ring device. Oh well. Maybe those will be the next to be replaced by Eufy. Apparently, continuing the story of Twitter and its new transformation, apparently they are now testing a way to share with small groups. So apparently it's Google Plus all over again. Circles are back.
Huh.
I wouldn't have mentioned Twitter if not for this sort of... every feature that was rejected is now back again in some other way. That just amuses me. If you use Firefox on Android, they now have added the feature that was previously available only on the desktop version where it will automatically switch websites to HTTPS. So I used to use HTTPS Anywhere, which was deprecated by the I forget which foundation was writing that as a plugin add-on for both Chrome and Firefox. I uninstalled it on the desktop when this feature came out and turned this feature on, so that it would always just redirect me to the secure version of the site, and then if there was no secure version, it would say you're going to the insecure version, which is fine with me as long as I know about it. But so now I don't have to add an add-on. It's now built into Firefox on Android. Wee. Yeah. If you are a user of the Kindle, they now support EPUB books. Again, this is sort of because they support it in the send to Kindle function. So that's where you can send a book to your Kindle or a document. They'll convert the EPUB into their own proprietary format and send it along, which I don't know why they spent so long waiting on, because they're books.
It is kind of odd.
Well, that's sort of the thing. I understand, okay, fine, they're not going to make the device natively support EPUB, but it's easy enough to convert between the formats. Why not? And they are also ending support for their oldest formats, MOBI and AZW. So my solution to this is Calibre, the open source book server. I've just backed everything up, and Calibre can... Is it Calibre or Calibre? I never pronounced.
I call it Calibre.
Okay, whatever it's called, and I'll look up at some point the correct pronunciation. It can convert between the formats, so we're back to I don't really care. As long as any old format I have can be converted to the new format and I don't lose my data, I'm fine with them saying that they want to upgrade to the later version of the format. If I couldn't convert, then I'd be annoyed. So much more for them. Upgrade as long as there's an upgrade path. Moving on to the EU, apparently they have I'm going to quote the title of the article from Android Police. The EU has a stunningly delusional plan for open social networks. So essentially, the EU Data Protection Supervisor wants to launch social media services. So can you imagine, a social media service that is essentially run by the European Union, or any government for that matter? I understand the concept of open source social networks. I understand the concept of federated and distributed networks. And some of those things are very intriguing. I'm somewhat amused by the idea that the government has decided we're unhappy with all of these companies having these big, we're just going to do our own.
Yeah, okay.
Just weird. I'm not sure if this really...
Yes.
We're back to Amazon. If you have an Amazon device, it can now alert you to people and packages heading towards your door. So for a while now, the Ring devices and other devices have been able to detect packages. Yep. However, now that can be notified. So essentially, the Amazon devices can tell you that whatever these other things. So it's essentially a link between the fact that the video device can already figure this out to make sure that it gets to your assistant device, whatever type of assistant you have. The Amazon Assistant, the Google Assistant, the Facebook portal, whatever we're thinking of. If anybody uses a Facebook portal. Speaking of the Facebook portal, since we're clearly talking about meta concepts, the WhatsApp meta multi-device service may soon allow secondary phones and tablets, which I think you would like. I know you are a WhatsApp user.
I am.
And you know that for years of me talking about whatever messaging service I was on, one of the things I always want is to have it on every device I might want to use it on, even if that device is not, even if I turn it off when I'm not using it. So I have a tablet. I want to be able to curl up on the couch and answer my WhatsApps or what have you. My Google Chats, my WhatsApps, what else are there? My whatever other messaging service without having to get too annoyed. The idea is that I can only have my messaging app on one device. instead of everywhere is annoying. So I'm happy that they're allowing this red. In theory, they've already started allowing multi-devices, so I can now see my WhatsApp stuff on my computer. And I confess I do have a WhatsApp account. But now it's saying here that you might be able to get a companion device to use it on another device so you can get the information. I have no problem with there being a primary. And saying this is your primary device and these are secondary, but that whole... other than that, I think that this is a good move. What do you think, Jerry?
I'm glad they're doing it.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this.
Yeah.
The next one is one, I own the earlier version of this device that I bought one of. That's actually sitting right here. The people at Akara, and that's, they do a lot of Zigbee stuff. And that's Xiaomi, I believe, is the parent company for the Akara brand. But they've put in essentially a new version of their motion sensor, which is, to be honest, out of all the Zigbee sensors that I've gotten, it's probably the best I had, even though it's currently unhooked.
Well, the prior version of so Xiaomi does not exactly follow Zigbee's protocols.
Yeah, but Home
Exactly
Assistant,
correctly.
ZHA, because the devices were so popular, they customized their code to be able to deal with it.
Right, but if you're running one of these, one of the older motion detectors through a repeater, and it's not one of specific repeaters, then it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And these new ones do.
Which is
and it is. I bought 3 of the old versions, and they didn't work because they were far enough away from my hub. They had to go through repeaters.
Yeah.
And my repeaters were not the special magical ones that were needed. And so I returned them, and then I got 3 of these P1s, and they've been working perfectly and amazing and great. And I love these. They're a little bit bigger, but they work.
And this one...
So there you go. That's my review.
Yeah, I'm saying in addition to the fact that they have all of the great features of the original, at least as far as I know, I'll take your... they're feature compliant with the original, I think, according to you. Right?
More so. These also have temperature sensors on them, although they're not
The original had light. I remember that because I have it, as I said, I had it installed for a while, but I had to remove it when they painted, and I just haven't put it back up. So this one also apparently has a 5-year battery life, which I can't complain about because I hate taking down little things and putting batteries into them. Which reminds me I have to go check the batteries on all of my doors.
Well, it might have a 5-year battery life because when a motion detector detects motion, it kind of like locks into a motion detected state for X number of seconds.
Yeah, so if there's a lot of motion, it's going to drain it faster.
Yeah, you can actually set how long that period is on these new P1s.
Yeah.
So,
no, I appreciate them. One of the reasons why I didn't put the sensor back up where it was painted is that it was badly positioned and it kept triggering incorrectly. So I figured one of the reasons I told them to take it down when they were fixing this was when I think I mentioned I had a leak here. So they weren't painting the whole room, they were painting the part of the room that had the water damage. I figured if I'm going to put it back up, I'd put it in a slightly different place where it wouldn't accidentally trigger when I was not wanting it to. So I just have to figure out when that is, and too much to do. But I'm excited about the sensors because, again, the next time I need one or when my current one dies, I probably will go get the newer one. Apparently, in other news, Google essentially kept more than 1 million dangerous apps off the Play Store last year, according to them.
Oh, yay, I'm being protected.
No, you aren't. You're on iOS. Anyway, apparently...
I'm being more protected
by
a bigger brother.
Yeah, the thing about this is apparently there have been a bunch of actual legitimate things that have been banned by accident. which is annoying. But I appreciate that they are trying to look for malicious applications and get rid of them. There has to be some level of protection. I can't review the code of every single application myself, can I?
Nope.
Why?
And at least Google makes it relatively easy and painless to get applications from other providers if you so desire.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Admittedly, there's trust issues there, but we do what we can. So let's see what else. Android 13 beta is around. So this is one of the ones from last month when we missed it. Apparently it has the more granular access to media files, which we were talking about before. That's where essentially they've separated out the permissions where it was previously to read storage, and instead it's going to be read images, read video, and read audio, so that if one app can only have permission to look for your audio files, the other can for video, and the other for images, so that apps can only do what they're supposed to be doing. Either way, to your view, it's just going to say allow it to access these things, so you don't have to select per thing. So if it requests both image and video, it will show it one single dialog to allow both. But again, why not? We missed the rollout of the Android App Store privacy section that we previously talked about.
Oh no, did we really?
Well, we would have talked about it when it was fresh. Well, you have this.
Yes.
You also have this on iOS because it was there before it was on the Google Play Store. The idea is that there's a section in the app where it talks about data privacy and security, where developers can explain what they're collecting and what they're doing. So I'm fine with this because you don't have to read it. So if you're not interested in what's going on, but I think it's important for apps to say what it is they are up to. So I'll give you an example here. I'm going to my phone. I'm going to pick an app and look at the permissions for that app. So here's one, Firefox. I mentioned that was just updated. So I'm going to look at its privacy, and I assume it's pretty detailed because they're pretty interested in privacy. So about this app, where's the privacy thing here? Can't find the privacy section. I thought it was rolling out. Maybe it hasn't rolled out to me.
Maybe it hasn't rolled to you.
Why? It's been so long since they announced this.
Well,
Maybe I
they
just
didn't
don't
say
know
it was a fast rollout.
Well, let me see if it comes up on an app that I haven't installed. Maybe once you've installed it, you don't get to know how bad or good it is. No, here we are. App permissions. See more. Here we are. I have app permissions, but yeah, so I have the older version because I'm not seeing the view. I see the app permissions section, which has been there for a while, but not data privacy and security. So maybe I'm missing it, but I just love live demos. They never work out the way I want them to. Anyway, as I said, I appreciate that they're telling people we're going to make it easy for you to figure out what this app is doing. And speaking of doing, here's the most depressing story on the list here. Also from the backlog from last month. The people at Fandroid wrote essentially what to do with your digital presence once you have passed on. So this is for Google specifically. There is an inactive account manager where you can share sections of your account data or warn others if you've been inactive for a period of time. And then designate a trusted third party who may be able to do things.
Nice.
Yeah. Technically, I probably should set this up. Either way, the people at Google just, as you know, started to force me to pay them money in the future, so I migrated all of my accounts over to Google Workspace. So now I get, I forget what they gave me. Oh yes, I get the ability to have 150 people in a Google Meet room. The only thing that troubles me about that is where am I going to find 150 people? I can't find one person who wants to be in a Google Meet room with me. You don't want to be in a Google Meet room with me, and we meet every week.
I don't want to be, but to be fair, I don't want to be in a Google Meet room with anybody.
Yeah, but as I was saying last week, I want them to have a family version of this, which actually gives you some family features. When I switched into Workspace, 3 things stopped working. Because there are apparently features that personal accounts get that Workspace accounts don't. So it's nice that I can pay them money to provide me with less service. Although now at least I can call their support line and not feel guilty. I'm not sure that's something I want to do because I usually would pay people not to want to talk to them. But anyway, Android Auto has rolled out support for one-tap quick replies to messages.
Ooh, nice.
Well, I think so because most of the time you really don't want to. I've dictated messages to it, and most of the time a yes or a no is probably good enough for me. Or an acknowledged. But anyway. Google apparently wants to declutter the smart home by adding more displays, which sounds weird. So they had all of these weird ideas like integrating displays into existing surfaces embedded under wood, textiles, and mirrored surfaces. So imagine there's a display when you go into your bathroom, the mirror is a display. When you're in your kitchen counter is a display.
Really? Yep.
I just thought it was interesting. I don't know if, this is one of those things where you don't know if it's ever going to happen. But, it looks like it would look like, and it may just be because I was watching Star Trek earlier. There was a season finale. And, where they have all those touchscreen interface things that were, back in the 80s when they started showing them, they were graphics, but now they actually are screens. Since technology has caught up with the 1980s vision, where you can, and now they went even further because now they have holograms and whatever. But anyway, the whole idea that you can have like these embedded interfaces is very interesting. But Jerry, the next story is about you because I wanted you to know you're not alone. Android has lost 8% of its global OS market share, according to this particular survey, whereas the people at Apple, iOS has gone up.
Yes, but
I'm just telling you, you're not alone. I didn't say that it's doom and gloom. The majority of the market is still Android. But you are not the only person who bailed out.
I'm sorry.
I rolled with it. I'm coming to terms. It's like, you have a tragedy in your life and over time you cope. It's the same sort of thing. I was, surprised when you decided to leave, but I've learned. Anyway, Google has decided to essentially completely kill any third-party call recording app once and for all. So beforehand, they were just making it harder and harder, and they did this with a lot of things. But we're down to they've moved it from hard to nearly impossible, and it will move again to impossible.
And this is sad because this would be so incredibly useful.
Well, no, you can do call recording, but they do not. It's third-party app call recording that they're limiting. So it'll only be, I think, only the operating system call recorder will be a possibility. And if you don't have that feature, you're out of luck. And I can sort of understand that because call recording I know makes people nervous because any app that does call recording could send copies of your calls off to random places. On the other hand, I'm not sure I trust Google to record my recordings either. But anyway, you have to trust somebody, I suppose.
That is true.
And I think, considering that Google is running the operating system and that pretty much touches every bit of data on your phone, they're probably the safest. If you're interested in air quality, we'll change tax here. Google search now has air quality reports in the United States. So you can search for air quality in your city, and if you're in the US, and it will essentially show you the air quality. We. Well, I like this because remember how happy I was when air quality came to the various smart displays so that it could display on top of my photos along with the temperature. And of course, it's later down in the show notes. The Weather Frog is finally available on the second generation Nest Hub. I love the Weather Frog.
You love Weather Frog, huh?
Well, I love the fact that after that they added in the feature that in between your photos, occasionally it would switch to the Weather Frog. Previously, you only had the choice; it was either all Weather Frog all the time or no Weather Frog. I like occasionally the Weather Frog peeks his head from in between your family photos. Go Weather Frog. He's a cute weather mascot. How can I not like a cute weather mascot? Anyway, a few other things. Android is readying support for passkeys. So once again, a bunch of companies are trying to kill the password. The problem is they seem to be killing the password with something that looks a lot like two-factor authentication. So essentially, instead of having two-factor authentication, we will have one-factor authentication. So once again, yeah, we'll see where that ends up.
Yeah.
But again, it's still back to then if you lose your device, you're in a lot of trouble. Which is always the case anyway.
Which is really scary.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I'd like to hear more about what happens in that scenario. Because I had this problem. My employer rolled out a second factor authentication that they made mandatory for employees. And that meant that employees had to install an app on their mobile device.
Yep.
So we're phase 1 was installing it, and then it was asking for it every 30 days. And they've gradually been ramping it up. As in, they've added more and more things that need to authenticate using the system. So somebody contacted me yesterday and said, I hadn't used the app for so long that Android uninstalled it. When I'm not sure if you notice, Android has a feature where they can remove apps if you don't use them, or offer to remove apps.
Yep.
So this particular individual hadn't opened up this, the second factor app in so long that Android suggested it be uninstalled due to lack of use, and they just did it without thinking. And now they're locked out of a bunch of things, and effective at the end of the month, the second factor will have to be used every 12 hours instead of every 30 days. Not thrilled about that. I would think a shorter time period is not really any more helpful, but I'm not our security team. But ultimately speaking, they're in a bit of trouble because now they can't reinstall it without getting the old one decommissioned, which means they have to go find somebody in our IT security department to help them reset it and go through like 15 hoops to get it back. Thus is life. But ultimately speaking, again, that makes me worry about what happens if you no longer have the device, and how do you protect against that. Moving along, if you like Android TV 13, which is, again, the TV version of Android 13, well, again, it's the same operating system. It's the customized version for TVs. It could reduce the power and bandwidth consumption of your TV.
How does it do that?
It contains a low-power standby mode, which will disable wake locks and restrict apps from accessing the network when active. So essentially, there's no reason why if your TV is in a standby state, it needs to be accessing the internet. So essentially, this is all optimization.
Neat.
So if there's no reason for apps to access the network when it's in low power. Maybe it needs to check for updates periodically, but it shouldn't have to create unnecessary load when it isn't being used. So again, I appreciate optimization. Android 13, the overall version for all operating systems, finally supports DNS over HTTPS. Whereas previously they supported just DNS over TLS, which they started in Android 9. So good that they're supporting both.
Yes.
Choice is good.
Although, I don't know if you want to support both on a phone, on a mobile network. But whatever.
Well, I'm sure that they have some sort of rules about it. And again, people will do what people will do. So there was a Google camera update that dropped also during, again, the dead period. So I thought it was interesting, again, because there are all these updates, and it's sort of hard to figure out what's actually going on in them because of changelogs. But I just wanted to use it as an opportunity to talk about the Google Camera app. There's still a lot of good features in there, but there's still those ones that I really would like that they won't put in for me. And if I use a third-party app, which do have those features, then I lose all of those Google customizations that make my pictures better.
Well, that's no good.
Well, it's sort of it's the catch-22 problem. Also, during the dead period, there was the 2022 Android App Excellence Summit, which, great name for an event. App Excellence Summit.
Yep.
So I wanted to include the article on what exactly they talked about at the App Excellence Summit. There was also an editorial, again, we'll catch up to today, from Kevin Toffel over at Stacy on IoT in regards to the idea that the smart home should get a do not disturb mode. So this, I thought, was a good idea worth discussing, because we talk about home automation, which is, why is it we can't put our smart home and all of the smart home routines into a mode where it wouldn't interrupt people? So this is something, again, that can be configured in Home Assistant, but it's sort of the idea of it that's worth talking about. Where I don't want to be annoyed, stop doing these things that I've automated during this period. And finally, we have one more story, which is 100 versions of Chrome later, what we learned. So this is a look back from the people over at Google on 100 versions of Chrome and what they learned from it. So it is a good read. So now we're up to date, Jerry. I've covered everything that I wanted to talk about while you were away, or while I was away, or whoever was away. Neither of it's
Do we
actually.
need to actually talk about what we learned, or is
what did you learn?
I didn't learn anything from our last 100 episodes.
Have you learned anything?
Not today. It's late.
No, I meant, have you learned anything over the last 584 episodes? I hope. I'm not going to say anything other than I hope you learned something.
Surely I have.
Have I transferred any knowledge to you?
I don't know.
Okay. Never know.
Seriously, it's too late for these questions.
But we never did the show any earlier, so how can I ever find out the answer to that question? Do I have to contact you at like 7 a.m.?
I don't know, maybe.
I'll be up. Anyway, so that brings us to the end of this week. We're back up to date next week. Are you available on the 12th for some sort of podcast?
Sure.
Okay. If there are any problems with that, of course, we'll deal with it. I now have an emergency way of getting a hold of you. Did it work reliably, by the way? For some incomprehensible, well, for some, as I think I mentioned, for some incomprehensible reason, you often do not get the messages that I was running through Google Chat. So now I have an alternate way of getting a hold of you. That was working. So hopefully we won't end up in the situation we ended up with in April. At least I hope not.
Okay.
Positive thing. So I look forward to seeing you this time next week. And if anybody wants to join us and make snarky comments, remember we do broadcast this live on YouTube. It's mostly just us talking with a visual of the show notes up on the screen. But there's a chat. You're welcome to come in and say snarky things that we may react to, or not snarky things, or helpful things, intellectual things, whatever sort of thing you want. It is not the recommended way, I think, to listen to this particular program. I think the audio file is probably a little better, but it's there so that people can participate should they wish to, and it's not like it costs us any more money, so why not? So until next week.
Until next week.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, folks.